Laying down ceramic tiles, each measuring 4x4 inches, in a 10x12 kitchen demanded considerable effort. Ronnie Jackson meticulously applied adhesive to each tile before carefully aligning it with the previous one. Ensuring proper alignment, he nodded in satisfaction, recognizing that even minor deviations in millimeters could jeopardize the project's success. Given Eccles Renovation and Remodeling's commitment to 100% satisfaction, Ronnie ensured every tile was flawlessly installed before proceeding. Sensing the completion of a row, Charlotte, Ronnie's wife, contacted Eccles on Ronnie's behalf. Answering the call, Ronnie prepared to begin the next row, already reaching for the box of tiles. The days when Charlotte greeted him warmly were gone. Her inquiries had become curt and impatient. Charlotte asked when he would be done. Ronnie assessed his progress and estimated it would take him about 3 hours in Pritchard's kitchen. After hearing his response, Charlotte ended the call abruptly, leaving Ronnie feeling pressured to hurry up. Despite his eagerness to finish quickly, Ronnie compelled himself to work with deliberate precision. Amidst his tasks, thoughts of his wife, with whom he had shared over 2 decades, lingered. Ronnie's acquaintance with Charlotte began at Eccles Renovation and Remodeling, where he first encountered her during his early days on the job. As Charlotte entered John Eccles' office, apologizing for her academic shortcomings at John W. Dawson High School, Ronnie observed her stout figure and long, wavy hair. Though distracted momentarily, he refocused on the array of hand tools in John's shed, only to be reminded sharply by John that Charlotte was his daughter. "Yes, sir," Ronnie responded, resisting the impulse to shrug apathetically. Sensing her father's reluctance for her to engage with his new employee, Charlotte adopted a habit of smiling flirtatiously and greeting Ronnie whenever they crossed paths. Ronnie remained courteous towards her, but didn't encourage her attention. "You understand, right?" John admonished Ronnie. "I don't want you chasing after my daughter, got it?" "I'm not pursuing your daughter," Ronnie replied honestly. In truth, 21-year-old Ronnie found 17-year-old Charlotte Rayner Eccles nothing more than a nuisance. She carried at least 50 extra pounds, struggled with severe acne, and possessed qualities that Ronnie found particularly unattractive. Additionally, he considered Charlotte to be quite immature. "Hey, Ronnie," Charlotte said coyly one day as Ronnie and another Eccles employee were unloading their equipment after a long day. "Uh-huh," Ronnie said, struggling with an unopened bag of quick-drying cement. "Listen, I turn 18 on Saturday." Charlotte leaned forward, granting Ronnie an unhindered sight of her blouse's front. "That looks nice," Ronnie remarked. "Happy birthday," another coworker chimed in with a smile. "So, Ronnie, what's my birthday present?" Charlotte playfully inquired. Close your eyes," Ronnie proposed, dragging his bag to the pickup truck's rear door. "Sure thing," Charlotte giggled. "What do you see?" Ronnie asked, tossing his bag into the vehicle. Nothing," Charlotte replied. "This is your gift. Happy birthday," Ronnie announced, dragging the bag of cement towards the barn. Lois Eccles compelled John Eccles to invite Ronnie Jackson to their home for Charlotte's birthday celebration. A medical store in Dolans, Utah sold Ronnie a lovely birthday card, while a pawn shop in Fairway, Utah provided him with a beautiful silver bracelet for $20. Lois pressured John into asking Ronnie to escort Charlotte to the prom. Despite wincing at Charlotte's appearance in a tight sleeveless dress, Ronnie courteously accompanied her, posing for photos, dancing with her, and escorting her home with a goodnight kiss. Days later, John reprimanded Ronnie for Charlotte's heartbreak due to his failure to call her. Despite his reluctance, Ronnie contacted Charlotte and asked her out, leading to subsequent dates. On the 5th date, Charlotte gave Ronnie her pureness. Tracy Lois Jackson was born 5 months after their wedding, and for the subsequent decade, Ronnie Jackson endured the least desirable assignments at Eccles Renovations and Remodeling. Ronnie was convinced that on some occasions, John Eccles deliberately secured jobs for Eccles Renovation and Remodeling just to burden his son-in-law with arduous tasks. Throughout the first 16 years of their marriage, Charlotte Jackson proved to be a devoted wife, striving to understand her husband's preferences and dislikes, mastering his favorite dishes, and observing silence on Sundays during Denver Broncos games. Charlotte also made efforts to lose weight, albeit with fluctuating success. Her skin improved somewhat, but acne scars remained visible, even with the aid of cosmetics. Despite these challenges, when Tracy attended Grover Cleveland Elementary School, Charlotte secured employment at the Garland County Public Library. Despite its modest pay, the comprehensive benefits, including health and dental insurance, made it a valuable opportunity. Right after commemorating their 16th wedding anniversary, Charlotte's cousin Darlene relocated to Dolans, Utah with her third or fourth husband in tow, their whereabouts a mystery. Darlene's boisterous, crude nature was matched by her husband Gary, who was no better, particularly since he was an ardent Dallas Cowboys fan. Unfortunately, Darlene's negative influence rubbed off on Charlotte, who became loud, brash, and prone to complaints, neglecting household duties, including cooking. Despite this, Ronnie, skilled in the kitchen and cleaning, didn't mind the extra workload. However, what was initially occasional slack turned into a nightly occurrence, as Charlotte, Darlene, and Gary often found activities outside the Jackson house. Meanwhile, Tracy learned household chores and sewing buttons on her school uniform, harboring resentment toward her father for her mother's neglect, rather than directing it at her mother. Ronnie's timing was almost impeccable. 3 hours after Charlotte's call, he completed the threshold installation. Struggling with stiffness in his back, Ronnie pondered his age while gathering tools and remaining tiles from the Pritchard house. Contacting Joan Eccles, Ronnie winced at the man's slurred speech, a result of a near-fatal blow that left him recovering slowly. John suffered a massive stroke shortly after his wife Lois disclosed her breast cancer diagnosis. Despite Lois's double mastectomy and radiation treatment, she remained burdened with caring for her husband, Dennis Eccles, aided by their sons Brian and Paul, along with Ronnie's assistance when necessary. Charlotte, the family's sole daughter, remained her mother's constant companion, driving her to Fairway Hospital and offering comfort during her moments of pain. Despite Lois's passing, John appeared reluctant to let go of life. Daily, he was wheeled into the office, cursing his useless left hand as he attempted to type on his computer keyboard. Afterwards, Dennis, Brian, or Paul would drive John home. Ronnie informed John over the phone that he was leaving Pritchard's job, and it was finished. John responded with grunts, barks, and wheezes. Back home, Ronnie savored the aroma of his favorite meal: pork chops, mashed potatoes, and French-cut green beans. After John suffered a debilitating stroke, Charlotte put the Jackson family on a heart-healthy diet. Despite losing 40 pounds on the diet, Charlotte remained overweight. Ronnie accused Tracy of going to Brigham Young University solely to avoid Charlotte's bland cooking, a claim Tracy didn't dispute. While Charlotte was busy at the stove, Ronnie leaned in for a kiss, but she waved him away and pinched her nose. Ronnie tossed his clothes into the hamper and washed away the sweat from his tired body. This work was tough enough when he was 21, and at 43, it strained his capabilities and didn't benefit his health. However, Dennis, Brian, and Paul paid no heed to his struggles. With mounting medical bills from John Eccles' rehabilitation, they claimed there was no money in the budget to hire help. Drying himself off, Ronnie ignored the reflection of a fit man in the foggy mirror. Clad in a t-shirt and shorts, he went downstairs just as Charlotte was setting his plate. "For dessert, we've got hot apple pie," Charlotte announced, placing a frosted mug and a can of beer before him. "Oh my God," Ronnie exclaimed inwardly, feeling bile rise in his stomach. He recalled the last time Charlotte served him frosted beer, enjoying it on her 35th birthday, months before their 17th anniversary. As Tracy was out with friends, Charlotte poured Ronnie a beer in a frosted mug. He savored the taste of the cold drink until Charlotte interrupted, saying, "Darling, there's something I need to talk to you about." Ronnie remained silent as Charlotte spoke at length about nothing in particular. Eventually, Ronnie urged her to get to the point, as his beer was almost finished. Charlotte then revealed that Darlene and Gary weren't exclusive. They had an open marriage. She then asked Ronnie if he had ever considered being unfaithful. "Indeed, I am a man," Ronnie affirmed. "I was eyeing that girl Shelley at the gas station," he confessed. Charlotte retorted, "Shelley from the gas station? As if you'd ever stand a chance." "But I'm married," Ronnie added. "Sure, I think about it, but that's where it ends." "Did you think I'd take it further?" Charlotte pressed on. "Did you believe you could act without facing consequences?" "I can't, Charlotte," Ronnie stated. "We're married. We made vows before our family and friends." Finishing his drink, Ronnie got up, cleaned his mug, and said, "We pledge to be faithful, to forsake all others, including Shelley from the gas station." "We could renew our vows," Charlotte proposed. "No new vows?" Ronnie replied firmly, placing the clean mug in the cabinet. "Our original vows suffice. While Darlene and Gary may have an open marriage, we don't and never will." "But," Charlotte began. "No buts. End of discussion," Ronnie cut in, exiting the kitchen. Ronnie hoped that was the end of it. However, Charlotte revisited the topic twice more. Each time, Ronnie firmly declined. "But honey," Charlotte persisted, "it's a testament to our love. We trust each other enough for this." Annoyed, Ronnie retorted, Do you even hear the nonsense you're saying? If you think I should let you cheat to prove my love, maybe I don't love you." Frustrated, when Charlotte mentioned an open marriage for the fourth time, Ronnie called her father. Charlotte watched the phone ring. "Hello, John. How are you?" Ronnie greeted. Charlotte's expression turned pale, realizing Ronnie was speaking to her father. Adding to her unease, Ronnie asked for Lois. "Hey, Lois, Charlotte has something to share with you," Ronnie conveyed. "Charlotte, tell your mom about what Darlene told you." Reluctantly, Charlotte took the phone from Ronnie. As she tried to stand from the table, Ronnie, foreseeing her move, firmly restrained her. Feeling cornered, Charlotte rambled incoherently and eventually ended the call. "You're despicable," she snapped at Ronnie. "Listen, Charlotte," Ronnie warned. "Mention this open marriage idea again, and our marriage will end. We'll get divorced." Charlotte never raised the topic again. Relieved, Ronnie noticed Darlene and Gary's efforts to reach out diminished. The pair, labeled the Toxic Twins by Ronnie, visited less frequently. Fast forward 5 years, Ronnie observed Charlotte pouring his beer, nearly overflowing with foam. She wasn't adept at it. "I'll be 40 next Tuesday," Charlotte began as Ronnie tasted his pork chop. "Yes," he acknowledged, swallowing. "And I was a Vestal when we met," Charlotte added. "Turning 40 and being a Vestal," Ronnie remarked, taking another bite. "The big 40, Charlotte emphasized. "During all this time, I've only been with one man, luckily for you," Ronnie quipped. "You've been with what, at least 10 women?" Kid Charlotte queried. "Is that fair?" "Life isn't always fair," Ronnie responded, sipping his beer. "Considering my upcoming birthday and all I've done for you, Tracy, and my parents, I think I deserve some freedom. Darlene and I are heading to Las Vegas next week. She found a good deal at a casino," Charlotte shared. Ronnie continued eating and drinking. "While there, we might meet some guys," Charlotte proposed. "Not necessarily for anything serious, just a date. Let me see what it's like with someone else. It might make me value what I have even more," she said. "The sauce is almost perfect," Ronnie commented. "What's your take?" Charlotte inquired. "I've told you. The sauce is nearly spot on," Ronnie responded. "Charlotte, this is about me branching out, gaining experience," Charlotte retorted. "So, you're suggesting I'm being unfaithful?" Ronnie questioned. "I've made up my mind," Charlotte asserted. "You can either support me or opt for a divorce. Your choice." "I'll initiate the divorce," Ronnie stated. "Do we have any ice cream for this pie?" "Hold on, Charlotte. Divorces cost a fortune. We can't just brush that aside," Ronnie exclaimed, surprised. "What's there to discuss? You've clearly decided everything. You and your dubious cousin are heading to Vegas. You're not asking. You've already chosen Vegas. Forget our massive pile of bills here. You're off to Vegas for your Big 4 celebration. And while you're at it, maybe a date? Even though you're married, you think that's okay? I either support your plan or face divorce," Ronnie said, pushing his empty plate away. "Does this pie come with ice cream?" "It's just for 1 week," Charlotte defended. "A week, a day, a minute. It doesn't change anything, Charlotte," Ronnie responded, slicing a piece of pie. "Infidelity is infidelity, and I won't be married to a cheater. So, no ice cream. Maybe you can take Darlene," Charlotte proposed. "Absolutely not," Ronnie chuckled. "Charlotte, I wouldn't be with Darlene if she were the last person on earth." Ronnie tasted the pie, frowned in distaste, and said, "Oh, wonderful. You used that aspartame stuff, didn't you?" pushing his plate away. Standing up, Ronnie wiped his mouth, exiting the kitchen. "I'm seeing a lawyer tomorrow to start the divorce process," Ronnie declared, heading upstairs. "Pritchard's job was done, and Dennis wasn't planning anything until he got the green light to rebuild the federal savings and loan. But Ronnie—" "You never listen," Charlotte interjected. "Sure," Ronnie yelled from downstairs. "You never heard me. I told you the consequences if you brought this up again. We're getting divorced." In their third bedroom turned home office, Ronnie powered up the computer. Though outdated, it still functioned and had internet access. After entering a search, Ronnie began looking for lawyers. He found Penny Barnes's online form and completed it. Shortly after, he received a call confirming an appointment with Penny Barnes. The next morning at 10, after Charlotte cleaned the kitchen, she went upstairs. Undressing, she got into bed undressed. When Charlotte pressed against him, Ronnie pulled away. "No thanks," he said, turning away. "Good night." Ronnie woke up at his regular time, 5:30 in the morning. Even though he didn't have work, he still rose at his customary hour. Quietly, he left the bed and softly closed their bedroom door. Descending to the kitchen, he brewed coffee and checked his email on his cell phone. An email from Penny Barnes's office detailed what he should bring to the 7 o'clock meeting. Ronnie debated having a second cup of coffee. Hearing Charlotte moving around upstairs, he chose not to make coffee for her. If she wanted some, she could make it herself. No, I told him, give it to me. Charlotte's voice came from her cell phone as she descended the stairs. Spotting Ronnie calmly reading news on his phone, she let out a shriek. She quickly ended her call and pocketed her phone. Ronnie, what are you doing here? Charlotte inquired. I mentioned Dennis hasn't received approval to start rebuilding the federal savings and loan, so I'm free today, Ronnie replied. The grass is too damp to mow, so I caught up on today's news. Did you hear Burns & Burns is considering a second location? You could have saved me some coffee, Charlotte complained. You can ask Darlene to make you some, Ronnie replied, placing his cup in the sink. Penny Barnes, an attractive brunette, wore glasses that Ronnie suspected were just for show, to appear more intellectual and serious. Penny remarked, examining their financial documents. You recently refinanced at 3.9%? My daughter's in her final year, Ronnie explained. Plus, my in-laws had hefty medical bills. Their deductibles were sky high, then funeral costs. And Eccles was nearly bankrupt. A couple of projects went over budget because Paul failed to time the orders right. Yes, Penny nodded, reading on. So, Mr. Jackson, how will divorcing your employer's daughter impact your job? I plan to end the relationship, Ronnie responded, a hint of a smile appearing. But Mrs. Jackson's position at the Garland County Public Library shouldn't be jeopardized, Penny speculated. By Friday, Dennis still hadn't gotten the go-ahead for the federal savings and loan renovations. Ronnie was at home completing renovations when Charlotte called. What's this? What kind of scam? Charlotte yelled as Ronnie picked up. Oh, you have the documents, Ronnie remarked. What's the issue with the first-floor bathroom? You mentioned something needs fixing, but honestly, I can't figure out the problem, Ronnie asked. The lock is sticking, Charlotte replied. We'll need to discuss this when I get home, all right? No, we've already had that discussion. Talking hasn't helped, especially when you seem more inclined to heed Darlene over your own husband. So I'm done talking, Ronnie stated firmly. All right, I see what's going on. Got it. Goodbye. But I don't want a divorce, Charlotte lamented. And I don't want to be married to an unfaithful person, Ronnie shot back. Anything else? No. Goodbye then. Ronnie declined Charlotte's subsequent call. When John's number flashed on the screen, Ronnie set down his screwdriver and answered. Hello? Ronnie greeted. John erupted with a mix of frustrated sounds and exclamations. Ronnie was surprised at the range of swear words he could discern as his father-in-law pressed for details about Ronnie and Charlotte. It's pretty straightforward, sir, Ronnie began. Darlene and her spouse practice an open marriage, and they influenced Charlotte to consider it too. I made it clear I'm not interested in that. Amidst another emotional outburst from John, Ronnie continued. Your daughter gave me an ultimatum last night, accept it or divorce. So, I chose divorce. John attempted to argue further, even resorting to emotional manipulation. Sir, I appreciate your concern, Ronnie fibbed. But with 3 sons and a daughter, this issue should be handled by them, not me. Besides, why would I want a business that's been losing money for 3 years? Ronnie muttered to himself. Charlotte returned home with reinforcements. Ronnie anticipated this and remained silent as Darlene and Gary voiced their perspectives. You see, Ronnie, since we're secure in our marriage, Gary smirked, Darlene can maintain friendships outside of it. I mean, as long as she returns to me, right? Darlene added. And we share everything. No secrets. It's brought us closer. Well, that certainly brings clarity, Ronnie remarked. Charlotte, Darlene, and Gary smiled in response. Actually, Ronnie corrected, rising from the couch, after our divorce, Charlotte, feel free to share your life and inner world with whomever you choose. Oh, what's this? Gary smirked. So just because you feel inadequate, Charlotte should suppress her own talents and desires? Ronnie flashed a grin, revealing all his teeth. He then strolled to the living room exit, facing the stairs. If believing that makes you feel better, go right ahead, Ronnie said, departing the room once more. That night, Charlotte attempted to initiate closeness. Rest up, Charlotte. You've got a busy day ahead, don't you? Ronnie said with a grin. As was his routine, Ronnie woke at 5:30 and left the bed. He no longer concerned himself with closing their bedroom door, indifferent to whether his early movements disturbed Charlotte. Descending the stairs, he brewed coffee, sipped it while perusing the news on his phone, and found himself scoffing at national headlines. These politicians really should live by their own standards. Lifetime perks? Forget it. Try living on Social Security. Private health care? Nope. Here's the same insurance they've mandated for everyone else. At 11, Gary knocked on the door. Ronnie answered, and Gary attempted to enter. Ronnie's firm hand halted Gary's eager advance. "What's up?" Ronnie inquired. "I'm here to pick up Charlotte for the airport," Gary explained, making another attempt to enter. "I'll inform her you're here," Ronnie said, nudging Gary back and shutting the door, returning to his recorded sitcom. Shortly after, Charlotte descended the stairs with her suitcase. "Why didn't you tell me Gary and Darlene were waiting outside?" she demanded of Ronnie. "Oh, right. Gary and Darlene are here," Ronnie replied, refocusing on his show. "Seriously? Must you act so immaturely?" Charlotte exclaimed. As she leaned in towards Ronnie, he sidestepped, leaving her to kiss the empty air. "We'll discuss this when I return," Charlotte stated. "No, we won't be doing that," Ronnie responded. After watching his sitcom and enjoying a satisfying meal, Ronnie finished his tasks by painting the front door a pale yellow. It complemented the house's red brick exterior beautifully. He chuckled when their cat, Samson, meowed from the garage. Samson was well provided for with food, water, and a clean litter box. "I'll let you out once the paint dries, buddy," Ronnie assured the cat. Upstairs, he canceled their shared credit cards. He wasn't aware of any cards Charlotte had separately and had no intention of supporting her indiscretions or her cousin's lavish lifestyle. He accessed Charlotte's personal bank account and withdrew half the balance. Similarly, he withdrew half from their joint account, from which he was the sole contributor. Utilizing the bank's website, he opened a new account solely in his name and transferred the withdrawn funds there. Online services facilitated the removal of his name from utilities and cable TV. He shrugged off an email from Garland County Power and Light, stating the cancellation would occur at the billing cycle's end. "Doesn't matter," Ronnie commented to the screen. "Time for Sloan's Pizza," Ronnie thought as his stomach rumbled. "Charlotte never let me eat there. Maybe I'll drop dead from a heart attack." He ordered pizza and a draft beer. He flirted with the waitress, even though she was significantly overweight. She smiled, tapping his wedding ring with her long nail. Ronnie glanced at the ring, his mood souring. He thanked her, left a tip in his truck, and departed. After considerable effort, Ronnie removed the ring, placing it in the console cup holder. "Forever love, huh, Charlotte?" he mused aloud. "Guess that ended today." His truck signaled low fuel. At the gas station, he initially chose $10 worth, but decided to fill the tank completely. "Filling 22 gallons sure takes time," Ronnie commented as the pump continued to gurgle. He visited a nearby convenience store and found Budweiser beer. While walking past another set of refrigerators, he noticed containers of ice cream. He picked up a pint of strawberry ice cream and brought both items to the counter. Shelley was no longer working there. She had gotten married, much to the disappointment of Ronnie and many other men who frequented that gas station, just to see her behind the counter. However, Shannon Carlisle, a petite brunette now working there, was almost as attractive as Shelley. Ronnie grinned as Shannon stepped onto a milk crate she had placed by the cash register. On a previous occasion, he had asked her height, to which she sharply responded, "I'm 4 feet 8 inches tall." "How short are you?" Ronnie quipped. Her eyes widened momentarily, then she burst into hearty laughter, brightening her already pretty face. From then on, she affectionately referred to Ronnie as Shorty. "Your wife out of town, Shorty?" Shannon inquired, observing his purchases. "My wife is gone for good," Ronnie replied. Shannon glanced at Ronnie's left hand, then met his eyes. After studying his face briefly, she asked, "So where are you taking me on our first date?" Brushing her thick brown hair back with her hand. "Shannon, as lovely as you are, why would you want to date an old guy like me?" Ronnie questioned. "That's about 7 inches," Shannon remarked, bagging Ronnie's items. Charlotte's 40th birthday was on Tuesday. On Wednesday, their daughter Tracy called Ronnie. "Eckley's renovation and remodeling," Ronnie answered. "Dad, yesterday was Mom's birthday," Tracy informed him. "Yeah, so?" Ronnie responded, scratching his stubbled face. "Why didn't you call her?" Tracy pressed. "I didn't want this," Ronnie sighed. "I just didn't, kiddo." "Why?" Tracy persisted. "You'll understand soon," Ronnie replied. "Your mother believes that now that she's 40, she should be with other men." "What?" Tracy exclaimed. "What do they teach you in school?" Ronnie retorted. "She's married. Married women don't date other men," Tracy clarified. "Oh, that's so old-fashioned," Tracy laughed. "Goodbye, Tracy," Ronnie said, ending the call. 10 minutes later, Charlotte's number appeared on Ronnie's phone. Despite recognizing the caller, he answered, "Eckley's renovation and remodeling." "Hi, Ronnie," Charlotte greeted firmly. "So, how's being a 40-year-old?" Ronnie quipped. "This isn't a joke, Ronnie," Charlotte snapped. "I agree, it's not funny," Ronnie conceded. "And thanks for canceling the credit cards," Charlotte added. You're welcome, Ronnie responded. Anything else? My birthday was yesterday, Charlotte mentioned. Why didn't you call? Ronnie questioned. I didn't want this. Maybe whoever you're with would have wished you, Ronnie suggested. Grow up, Ronnie, Charlotte retorted. Really, Charlotte? Adults honor their commitments and respect their vows, Ronnie stated. Who's Melissa Kalick? Charlotte inquired. Remember Melissa Strom? She married Lucy Kalick, the bank manager, Ronnie clarified. Regardless, she's employed at Gold Standard Real Estate now. I've got this adorable redhead. She's as charming as can be. On the bright side, she believes she can quickly find a buyer for our house, Ronnie shared. Buyer? Ronnie, we aren't selling the house, Charlotte exclaimed over the phone. Can you really afford to surprise me like this? We have to settle the second mortgage, as Melissa informed me. She might find a buyer, but will likely need to bring cash to clear that mortgage, Ronnie replied. We're not selling the house, Charlotte reiterated loudly. I've stored all your furniture at the EZ warehouse on Independence Road, next to Chevrolet Place, Ronnie added. Unit 212. Your dad has the key. Oh, Lord, Ronnie, I need to get home. Charlotte's voice was filled with distress. Your dad couldn't fetch Samson, so I took him to Dennis's, Ronnie continued. Dennis? Oh, God, Dennis has those Dobermans, Charlotte exclaimed in terror. Shoot, I didn't consider that, Ronnie chuckled. No wonder he was keen on adopting that cat. Ignoring his wife's pleas, Ronnie ended the call. Leaving the phone on the kitchen counter, he headed upstairs to surf the internet. He heard his cell phone ring, but chose to ignore it. And maybe your mom's new boyfriend can cover his final school year, Ronnie muttered. Why don't you check for a scholarship for students with a GPA of 2.1? Because with that attitude, it's tough to expect your dad to finance your education, he retorted. After shutting down the computer, Ronnie shaved, removing 3 days of stubble carefully. He then took a hot shower, got dressed in jeans and a t-shirt. The computer was in the pickup truck's cab, behind the passenger seat. As his final act, Ronnie discarded his cell phone in the trash and wheeled the trash can to the curb. Going to miss you, Herman Vogart, a neighbor, greeted Ronnie on the street. Vogart, you won't do this, Ronnie laughed, shaking Herman's hand. The most we spoke was when you griped about Tracy's boys blasting their music. It's tough getting neighbors to give you space. Ah, man, Herman sighed. You were the ideal neighbor. Never borrowed stuff, never asked me to feed your cat or collect your mail during vacations. I bet the next folks will be all over me. You brought it on yourself being so friendly, Ronnie remarked. The trash can's ringing, Herman pointed out. Mind your business. It's probably some critter, Ronnie smirked, shaking Herman's hand again. Charlotte tried unlocking the front door, but found her key didn't fit. She pulled out her phone, dialed the number for Gold Standard Real Estate listed on the sign, and stared at it in disbelief. Her phone was fully charged, but it seemed faulty. Darlene lent Charlotte her cell, while Gary checked the house's windows and doors. Charlotte whispered curses when the call connected. Gold Standard Real Estate, Melissa Kalick speaking, Melissa greeted cheerfully. This is Charlotte Jackson, Charlotte snapped. My key doesn't work at my house. Ah, Ronald Jackson's ex, Melissa chirped. Ex, Charlotte retorted. I need to sign some paperwork, Melissa continued. Guess what? I have clients interested in your home. It's not for sale, Charlotte exclaimed. So, are you buying out Mr. Jackson? Melissa probed. The Richmonds might be disappointed. They liked the Purcell house, too. Gary returned, confirming the house was secure. Charlotte reiterated the house wasn't for sale and called Ronnie. You idiot, Charlotte muttered as Ronnie's voice answered. Eccles Renovations and Remodeling. Can we drop you somewhere? Gary interrupted, growing impatient. My cat, Charlotte remembered, squeezing back into the car. Hey, Dennis answered. It's me, Ronnie said. He gave Samson to you? Charlotte asked. With Poppy, olive oil, and Blue Tool around? They'd shred that cat, Dennis snapped. No, Dad has him. You need to get him. Dad's physical therapist is allergic. Thank goodness, Charlotte sighed. Thanks, Dennis continued. Ronnie's disappearance almost bankrupted us. I secured a federal loan but had to let Framonte take it because none of us can lay ceramic tile. Uh-huh, Charlotte interrupted. Who else are you calling? Darlene snapped as Charlotte dialed her dad's number. Don't you have unlimited? Charlotte asked. Nope, 1,000 minutes monthly. Mr. Football used most, Darlene replied. Last call, Charlotte assured. John angrily agreed to let her come over. Gary drove them to John Eccles' house. Darlene and Charlotte hugged, and Charlotte headed inside. How was it? Gary asked Darlene as she got in the car. Disastrous, Darlene sighed. Who'd want her? Not with you around, Gary joked, watching Charlotte enter. Any money from her? Darlene inquired. Almost, Gary said, pulling out. Ronnie's such a pain. Can you hear me? Darlene sounded frustrated. He canceled her credit cards. She used her debit, Gary explained. ATMs are everywhere, Darlene pointed out. She got about $10, Gary muttered. We need gas, Darlene stated. With ATMs and the internet, she's fine, Gary reasoned. Unless your football-obsessed hubby isn't hogging minutes, Darlene retorted. Here's $20, Gary handed Darlene. She went online, Darlene concluded. What's the connection to ATMs? Gary inquired as he steered into the gas station. Charlotte noticed Ronnie covered half her bill. Just grab $10, all right? We still have the electricity bill to cover unless you've settled it already, Darlene suggested. Gary nodded and entered the adjoining convenience store. Darlene observed Gary glance at the beer cooler and then honk the car horn. Gary shot her a disapproving look through the store's window, but proceeded to the counter. I was only getting one can, Gary claimed upon his return. Just one? Darlene retorted. When was the last time you settled for just one can? Gary mumbled. Hey, isn't that petite lady new here? How come she has such prominent chest? Gary commented. She's petite, so her chest seemed larger in comparison, Darlene corrected. Let's get that gas, Gary urged. Fine, Darlene responded reluctantly. Amidst their argument, Charlotte endured her father's furious monologue. Since his stroke, John's language has become increasingly crude, and he didn't shy away from using derogatory and harmful words to describe those around him. When was the last time you looked in the mirror? John questioned. Fat pig. That face looks like it was doused and saved with an ice pick, John went on. Dad, Charlotte exclaimed, deeply hurt. Turning 40? So what? Women hit 40 every day, John grumbled. But not all betray their family at 40. John gestured towards legal documents on the coffee table. Just then, Samson entered the room. You'll need a lawyer, and I have to clean that cat litter box, John snapped. Good Lord. I don't know what that animal eats, but it stinks to high heaven, John muttered. You're back in your old room, John said tersely. I hope betraying us was worth it. Do you hear me? I hope it was. 40 years old and still making foolish choices. Later that night, lying in her childhood bed, Charlotte gazed at the wallpaper she and her mother had chosen when she was 8. Samson remained still as Charlotte switched off the light, staring into the darkness. The week of her 40th birthday had begun on a high note. The flight to Vegas was smooth, Charlotte recalled, watching the city lights emerge below. After checking into their hotel, Charlotte and Darlene tried their luck at the roulette table before opting for dinner. Charlotte felt humiliated when a waiter informed her credit card was declined. The second met the same fate. The manager brought out her third card with a stern expression. Charlotte tried her debit card, which thankfully went through. Upon checking her bank, she discovered her balance had been halved. Both she and Darlene blamed Ronnie Jackson, feeling he had overstepped. Way overstepped. Come on, Darlene, Darlene urged. We're in Vegas. We can't let this setback spoil our fun, right? However, watching Darlene lose $300 at the blackjack table dimmed the evening's excitement a bit. That was Charlotte's $300, Darlene muttered. Charlotte struck up a conversation with a handsome young man at a bar, 25-year-old David Daltrey, and they headed to her room. It was a brief 4 minutes, Charlotte, Darlene quipped. Charlotte caught David attempting to snatch her wallet from her purse. Darlene lamented her $100 daily limit. Lady Luck wasn't on Darlene's side this trip, Charlotte joked. Darlene's $100 seemed to vanish as soon as she left the hotel room. On Tuesday evening, my birthday, I approached another young man, Charlotte remembered. He smirked and said, Lady, if I wanted closeness with a 300-pound woman, I'd be home with my wife. He then suggested a blind convention nearby, mocking my appearance. Feeling hurt, Charlotte took the elevator to their room. Seeing the Do Not Disturb sign, she groaned and spent hours in the lobby coffee shop. Eventually, she messaged Darlene about returning. Back in her room after a shower, Charlotte wore hot lingerie and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She noticed Ronnie hadn't called or texted for her birthday. Tracy didn't call either, but sent a birthday text. Checking her phone, Charlotte felt the sting of her husband's neglect. Yet she appreciated birthday wishes from Dennis, Brian, and Paul. The next morning, Darlene grumbled about the budget, hinting she paid for their flight and hotel. By Saturday, Charlotte contemplated ending her relationship with Darlene due to her constant complaints. But with Darlene holding their airline tickets, Charlotte stayed quiet. Now in her childhood room, Charlotte sighed deeply. Her birthday month was far from a celebration. Jim Runkles, recommended by Freddie Baxter from the Garland County Public Library, reviewed the papers from Penny Barnes's office. He then delivered a blunt assessment. He gets half, you get half. The house must be sold, with profits split evenly. Expenses are shared. Despite his unemployment, he isn't seeking child support, Jim stated. But I don't want a divorce, Charlotte protested. I don't want to lose my home. I don't want to miss Jackson. It doesn't change the facts, Jim responded. One person wants a divorce, and that can lead to it. Can we get a consultation? Charlotte asked. We can request one, Jim confirmed, and Charlotte smiled. I'll call Penny's office. Listening to Jim, Charlotte glanced at his book titles, hearing mostly uh-huh and from him. All right, Mrs. Jackson, here's the issue, Jim stated, setting his phone on the table. I'm paying you to avoid issues, Charlotte responded, gripping her purse firmly. Miss Barnes doesn't know where her client is. Your husband came, settled her fee, and departed, Jim relayed. She only possesses his email address. Is that essential? It's her sole means to reach him. And no, she won't disclose the email. It's protected by attorney-client privilege, Jim clarified. Oh, Charlotte murmured, settling back in her chair. Ronnie informed Miss Barnes that henceforth your daughter will cover her tuition and dorm costs, Jim added. He mentioned something about initiating new traditions. Do you grasp what he's implying? Charlotte inquired. No, Charlotte whispered. But I suspect Tracy might. Charlotte bypassed her 41st birthday, dressing for work and leaving her room. John remained absorbed, hands limp on his lap, when his daughter planted a kiss on his cheek. Anything you need before I head out? Charlotte queried. No, John mumbled. All right, I'll depart. Take care of Samson, all right? Charlotte endeavored to inject cheer into her voice. Everything's fine. My two main guys will be good. Got it? John responded, his words interspersed with grunts and barks. Charlotte commuted to work, following her familiar route from her dad's residence to the library. Her phone buzzed, but she waited until parking to check. Happy birthday, flashed on her screen. Thanks, Tracy, Charlotte responded flatly. Thrilled for my birthday, just brimming with joy. Still, she acknowledged Tracy's greeting. Despite shedding 25 pounds since turning 40, Charlotte's transformation went unnoticed. She felt overlooked since Ronnie's departure. Shortly after Ronnie exited, Charlotte discerned the nature of Darlene and Gary's open marriage. Financial constraints bound them, leading to a loveless coexistence in a trailer as mere roommates. Darlene and Gary lacked affectionate gestures. Charlotte recalled Ronnie's warmth and kisses, especially after she cooked him a meal. However, after announcing her solo Vegas trip for her 40th, Ronnie's affection waned. Their last encounter ended with Ronnie evading her kiss. An hour post Tracy's text, Charlotte's phone rang. Reading a message from her boss questioning her tardiness, she disembarked from her car, dazed, and approached her workplace's rear entrance. Tracy received a thank you text from her mom for the birthday wishes, followed by a picture of a brown-haired little girl gazing back at her. Antoinette Barbara Jackson, weighing 6 pounds, 4 ounces, and measuring 17 inches, checked a text from her father's phone. Tracy found it ironic that her mom and younger sister shared a birthday. She doubted her mom would see the humor, or if her dad even remembered. Is this Shannon Parquet? Becky McMahon here, a brunette stated over the phone. We offer carpets, tiles, hardwoods, and laminate flooring. Hey, Shorty, a voice teased on the line. Pardon me, Ronnie Jackson told a couple choosing hardwood floor colors. He signaled Bobby to assist them and picked up the call. The man nodded and approached the couple. Ronnie moved to the wall phone and answered the blinking line. Scanning the trading floor, he listened attentively. He awaited news from Samuel D. about securing an exclusive flooring contract for the developer's projects. Listening, Shorty, Ronnie greeted. Guess what, Mr. Shorty? Shannon's voice teased. Looks like you and your 7 inches are making me a mom again. Shannon, really? Ronnie exclaimed in surprise. Tony's still in diapers and we're expecting another? Shannon giggled on the other end. Where are you? Ronnie asked. Just left Dr. Pruitt's, Shannon replied. Hurry over, Ronnie urged. We're celebrating at the Stone Grill. All this talk about my figure is why we're in this situation, Shannon chuckled, pushing Tony's stroller from Alliance Square Medical Center into the Texas heat. At 4'8", she brushed her hair back and scanned her surroundings, always cautious due to her height. She faced the sun and smiled. When Ronnie told Shannon Carlisle he was leaving the gas station, she questioned his destination. Ronnie paused. Why? He asked. So I can forward my last paycheck, Shannon quipped, stepping off her milk crate. Heading somewhere warm? I'm already snowed in. Shannon, what's a stunning girl like you doing with an old guy like me? Ronnie teased. Ready to banter back, Shannon replied, About 7 inches. Closing her eyes, she asked, What color are my eyes? Dark brown, Ronnie answered. I have a dimple. On which side? She queried, opening her eyes. Left, he responded. And when you smile, your right front tooth peeks out, slightly crooked, he added. Why say goodbye? Shannon questioned, moving from the counter. Polly, I'm leaving. I'm not sure, Ronnie said as Polly, hauling his 312 pounds, exited the warehouse. Sure, Shannon grinned, taking Ronnie's hand. Polly, I'm out. 2 hours left, Polly protested. Feeling sick? Shannon claimed. Goodbye. Ever been to Texas? Outside Alliance Square Medical Center, Shannon whispered, Ronnie, I love you.
Lately, I've become quite popular in the neighborhood, especially among the grandmothers. After graduating from college, I was at a loss without a job, pacing anxiously about my future. One day, my uncle, who lived nearby, told me he was providing services for seniors in the area and suggested I come and learn the ropes. I started helping out with office work at his center. My uncle encouraged me to get certified, saying there was a written exam, but it was manageable and having a national certification could come in handy later in life. So I began studying for the certification. I enjoyed learning new things during the lectures and passed the exam on my first try. The practical training was tough, but I persevered, seeing it as a passing phase. I was working at my uncle's center when suddenly I was called to assist an elderly person at their home. The senior needed immediate care, and there were no caregivers readily available, so I was sent. My assignment was at the home of a senior suffering from spinal stenosis named Emily. There was food prepared by her daughter, so I only needed to help with simple meals, daily walks, and personal hygiene assistance. I had experience managing a household from my college days living alone, so I didn't find it difficult to provide these services. Emily was very dignified and had a youthful demeanor, and her daughter, who lived with her, appreciated the help a young person provided. Going from office work to hands-on service felt rewarding and gave me a sense of purpose. I provided service at Emily's house from 9 in the morning to noon, 3 hours daily. One day, Emily was suffering from constipation, a painful condition for her. I quickly donned sanitary gloves and assisted her with her issue. Although she was embarrassed to receive such help from a young man, I reassured her and handled the situation with care. It wasn't easy, but I remembered reading about such scenarios during my training. Although it seemed challenging to help someone who wasn't family, I learned that this was quite common. Understanding how dangerous constipation could be for seniors and seeing Emily's relief and smile made me feel fulfilled in my work. Because of my service to Emily, I was referred to another neighbor, Sophia, who also needed caregiving. Sophia requested my services for the afternoon. Emily had praised me so much that she insisted no one else was needed, and she wouldn't consider anyone else for the job. She asked specifically for me, so I informed my uncle that we had a new client at our center, all thanks to Emily's high regard, which led to another grandmother seeking our services. He was thrilled with the news. I had heard that Emily takes a bath once a week, assisted by her daughter. But one day, her daughter had an unexpectedly busy schedule and couldn't help Emily with her bath. She apologized to me and asked if I could make sure Emily didn't slip while bathing. I agreed and waited outside the bathroom door for Emily to finish her bath. To my surprise, Emily asked me to help scrub her back. It felt a bit unusual helping someone of my grandmother's age with such a personal task, but I did it. Emily was overjoyed, saying it had been a long time since she had enjoyed a shower so much. I even helped her dry her hair with a dryer. Watching her slowly dress herself, maintaining her independence, was heartwarming. My role was to support her in what she could do, so I simply observed and ensured her safety. After her bath, Emily slept contentedly, and I tidied up her room. Unexpectedly, Emily woke up and asked me to lie down beside her. I politely declined, but she insisted, not wanting her offer to be ignored. Lying beside her, I listened to stories of her life. Emily, once vibrant and active, now found it difficult to leave her house, and felt deeply saddened by this. I comforted her, and she expressed how much she appreciated a fine young man visiting her home daily, saying these were her happiest days. I sensed her loneliness, and we awkwardly shared a moment. The next day, Emily couldn't look me in the eye, and I felt the same, but I understood her feelings and her silent request for companionship. After performing my contracted services, Emily and I spent quality time together, promising to keep our shared moments confidential. In the afternoon, I visited Sophia, who enjoyed storytelling. Although she could manage household chores, her pace was noticeably slower. Sophia loved reminiscing about the past, and I emphasized the importance of fine motor exercises for her well-being. She mentioned her sister lived in the countryside and often sent various farm products by mail. Taking advantage of this, I engaged Sophia in activities, like sorting beans and peeling garlic while we chatted. She was grateful for the company and the help, especially since she struggled with severe incontinence. One day, after running out of adult diapers, she had an accident in her cotton panties. Embarrassed, she hurried to the bathroom to clean up, but soon after, I heard a loud thump. Sophia had fallen in the bathroom. I rushed in to find her embarrassed and on the floor. I quickly helped clean and escort her back to bed. As she recounted her past, she broke down in tears, mourning the loss of her once athletic prowess. I consoled Sophia, and she eventually fell asleep. When it was time for me to leave, she pleaded to keep what happened a secret, and I assured her that I remembered nothing. Days later, through Sophia's referral, I met another senior in her late 60s named Olivia, who, despite being mobile, had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Here's the continuation of your story translated into American English with cultural nuances considered and English names retained. After finishing my afternoon service, I headed to Olivia's house. Olivia insisted on having me and nobody else, so I began visiting her after my other appointments. With her condition, she often repeated herself. I spent time with her doing puzzles and folding paper crafts. One day, she even called me her grandchild and gave me a crumpled dollar bill from her purse to buy candy. Another day, she mistook me for her husband, saying she was shy but ready to consummate their marriage. I was deeply moved by her sincere belief and hugged her tightly. Olivia got ready with such earnestness, preserving her dignity as much as possible. I helped her get dressed as she insisted she had things to do with her husband. The experience with Olivia was surprising despite her age. She was quite spry, reminding me that age is indeed just a number. I provide this service daily to 3 grandmothers. Sometimes, after calming Olivia, who playfully suggests having a baby, and calls me her husband, she lightly snores away in sleep. The next day, she greets me as teacher. The grandmothers always keep their promises to me. I feel a sense of responsibility knowing these women, who've been through tough times and lost their spouses, now rely on me. One day, after providing service at Emily's home, she asked me to wait a moment before leaving. She shyly offered me a tomato saved, especially for me, a gift from her daughter. I tried to decline, suggesting she keep it, but she insisted that I take it to share with my parents. Sophia expressed her gratitude for handling even the disposal of her adult diapers by giving me some of her farm produce. Olivia, referring to me affectionately as her husband, gave me a pair of long, warm socks to keep me cozy. However, I couldn't just be on the receiving end. I bought the lovely lady some snacks and pretty sleep socks. You might wonder how a young man can do this job, but I like to think of them as my grandmothers, and that makes all the difference.
Jim Fox was a dedicated family man, working hard to provide for his wife Helen and their daughter Emily in Pennsylvania. He had been steadily advancing at his company, and their life seemed stable and mutually respectful. Although their marriage had its challenges, Jim believed their bond was strong. However, Helen had grown restless, secretly longing for excitement. Over time, Helen's dissatisfaction deepened, leading her to seek attention outside their marriage. Jim, focused on his career and daughter, remained unaware of Helen's feelings, trusting their relationship completely. The eventual discovery of her betrayal was a crushing blow. One morning, Jim woke up feeling uneasy after a restless night. He had seen Emily's boyfriend with another girl at the mall, and they were kissing. Jim knew telling Emily would hurt her, especially with a crucial volleyball match approaching, so he decided to wait until after the game. Later, Jim was called into a meeting with his boss and introduced to Ralph Jenkins, the previous owner of a newly acquired plant in Daytona Beach. Jim was offered a promotion to oversee the maintenance team there, along with a 25% pay raise and a rent-free apartment for a year. Without hesitation, Jim accepted, thinking his wife would welcome the move to warmer weather. After the meeting, Jim drove Ralph to the airport and began feeling optimistic. Emily could finish her last semester in Daytona and leave her boyfriend behind. But as Jim left the airport, he spotted a red Camry with a visible radiator parked at a nearby motel. It matched the description of Helen's car, which had recently been damaged. His heart raced as he parked nearby, suspecting the worst. Jim, in a company car Helen didn't recognize, decided to wait and see who was with her. Realizing he needed more information, he cut the valve stem on her spare tire, knowing she would call him for help if she had a flat. Then he waited, tense and anxious, to see what would happen next. Half an hour later, Jim heard a curse at his car window, which he lowered slightly. "Damn it, what do I do now?" Helen muttered. "No problem, Zexy lady. After a meal like that, I'm happy to help," her companion replied as Jim's world crumbled. "I don't have a spare tire. My husband didn't put the wheel back in the car after fixing it," Helen complained. "What an idiot," her lover chuckled. "I always make sure my wife's car is in top shape. I shouldn't have come with you today. What now?" "Let's go back to our room while I call for help," Helen suggested, and they headed back to the motel. Jim waited for her call, planning how to respond, but his phone never rang. 20 minutes later, Jim's heart sank further as he saw Emily's Honda Civic pull into the parking lot. She walked to the motel, knocked on the door, and after a minute brought a tire from her trunk as Helen and her lover approached. "Frank, pay for this so Emily can play tonight. She needs to stay focused," Helen said. "Thanks, Mom. If you cared, you'd have dressed before I arrived. I need to get to school and prepare. Can you handle it from here?" Emily asked, clearly upset. "No problem, Em," Frank replied. "I'll get dropped off at Home Depot, and I'll be at your game tonight." "Thanks, Frank. Just don't sit too close to Mom. Dad will be there, and I don't want any drama." "Don't worry, I won't cause trouble," Frank laughed. "Your dad won't even notice what's going on." "Frank, don't talk about Jim like that. He's my husband and Emily's father. He deserves respect," Helen interjected. Emily shot back. "Respect? After what you're doing? I just want to finish school and get out of this mess. I told you I love your father and there won't be a divorce. We'll grow old together," Helen insisted. "You're delusional. Dad won't tolerate this forever, and Frank isn't worth it." "You're just using each other while you can," Emily retorted. "Dad has put just as much effort into this marriage." "Your father? He's not like that. He's a good husband and father," Helen laughed. Emily nodded toward Frank. "Frank's a good guy, huh? Yet he's cheating on his wife with you. If he cared about his family, he wouldn't be here." "Enough, Emily. This isn't up for debate. Get to school and focus. Frank and I will be at your game." "Doesn't make me feel any better," Emily muttered. "Just keep him away from Dad. Frank may underestimate him, but Dad's not a pushover." Emily drove off, leaving Helen and Frank alone as he tightened the tire. "She's not too thrilled about us, is she? My daughter would react the same way. That's why I keep this hidden from her and my wife." "Emily knows what's happening and is keeping quiet to avoid a divorce," Helen reassured him. Jim sat in the back seat of the company car, disoriented long after Helen had driven away. Discovering her affair was painful, but learning that Emily knew and accepted it devastated him. He remembered Emily's volleyball match was about to start, and for the first time in her high school career, he would miss it. Feeling too upset to face his family, He returned home, had a few beers, and contemplated his future. The realization that Helen might not want to move to Daytona because of her lover hit him hard. He reflected bitterly on how faithful he had been, and how she had taken advantage of that trust. Jim realized Helen didn't know about the Florida relocation and would assume he was going to Michigan. He thought about moving to Florida alone, giving himself time to sort out his family issues while she stayed in Pennsylvania with Frank. The idea appealed to him as a small act of revenge. With the weekend and upcoming week to plan, Jim decided to leave for Daytona after Thanksgiving. His wife and daughter would think he was headed to Michigan, giving him space and a break from them. After taking some Dramamine and another beer, Jim prepared to sleep in the guest room. He moved his clothes and toiletries, then locked the door and tried to sleep, though worry kept him awake for a while. Emily noticed her father's truck in the garage and wondered why he hadn't come to her game. Helen, surprised by the empty beer cans, went to check on him but couldn't find him in the usual places. They eventually found Jim asleep in the guest room, unresponsive to their attempts to wake him. He must have been drinking, Emily guessed, puzzled by his behavior and his absence at her game. "We'll ask him in the morning," Helen suggested, noting that he sometimes slept elsewhere to avoid spreading illness. She urged Emily not to be too hard on him. Helen mentioned that Frank thought Emily played well and could get a scholarship, which irritated Emily. "I don't care what Frank thinks," Emily snapped. "He's a cheating idiot, and I'd be happy never to see him again." "Why can't you be happy for me?" Helen complained. "Frank makes me feel young and attractive." "I'm worried about Dad. If he finds out about Frank, it'll break his heart," Emily replied. "That's why he can't find out," Helen said. "I give your father all the love he needs. Frank just gives me something extra." "Keep telling yourself that, Mom," Emily said. "But if you keep this up, Dad will find out, even if it's not from me." "He won't suspect anything if you don't tell him," Helen insisted. "Your father completely trusts me." At 5 a.m., Jim woke up, quietly dressed, and left the house. After finishing breakfast at IHOP, his phone rang. "Jim, are you okay?" Helen asked, worried. "You missed Emily's match last night, and this isn't like you." "I just decided to be unpredictable," Jim replied before hanging up and turning off his phone. Jim spent the morning packing his tools and belongings into his truck, preparing for his move. As the day went on, he became more confident about his decision to start fresh in Florida. He knew he had to keep his plans secret until after Thanksgiving, so Helen and Emily would think he was heading to a colder location. Late in the afternoon, Jim returned home. Helen angrily confronted him for missing Emily's match and acting out of character. 2 days ago, he might have felt guilty, but now her anger meant nothing to him. He simply nodded and left the house, heading to a sports pub for dinner. To his surprise, Jim found he could still enjoy himself. After a few drinks and some sports talk with the other patrons, he returned home around 11 p.m. Helen and Emily were watching a movie. Helen sarcastically remarked on his absence and demanded an apology. "Okay," Jim muttered, grabbing his clothes for the next day and moving to the guest room. As Jim left, Emily noticed, "He doesn't seem to care that you're upset. It's like he enjoys sleeping in the guest room." "You don't know your father," Helen grinned. "He won't last 2 nights before coming back to my bed." "Maybe," Emily replied skeptically, "but I hope he doesn't find out about Frank." "Stop mentioning his name," Helen insisted. "I want to keep this a secret." Emily retorted, "If he's not ready for his wife, maybe you should be the one to raise him." Helen was taken aback by her daughter's bluntness. Emily had agreed to keep Frank a secret to avoid her parents' divorce, but her disrespect was growing. Helen struggled to balance being a good mother and lover, knowing her daughter was aware of her affair. Helen also wondered what had changed in Jim over the past 2 days. He was acting differently, and she wasn't going to tolerate it. But she was confident he'd come around. The Zex they had was too good for him to stay away for long. Jim woke early again on Sunday, had breakfast at IHOP, and took a long walk in the park, enjoying the cool November morning. He appreciated the fresh air, knowing he wouldn't have to deal with the cold once he moved to Florida. He returned home before noon with a six-pack, turned on the TV, and settled in to watch the Eagles game. Helen ignored him for an hour before angrily leaving the house. Helen returned home around 6:30, and by 7 o'clock, the second batch was finished. When Jim noticed there was no dinner, he turned off the TV and left. He ended up at a local sports pub, enjoying ribs and football. The Eagles had beaten the Giants, and Jim was in a good mood, looking forward to Thanksgiving Day when they'd play the Cowboys. "Dad's been acting strange lately, don't you think?" Emily asked her mother. "He usually watches the game on Sundays. Did you two fight?" "We barely spoke," Helen replied. I told him he needed to apologize for missing your match and drinking too much before he could sleep in my bed again. I also told him I wouldn't cook for him until his attitude changed. He'll miss my cooking and love, and he'll apologize soon. When Jim got home, the football game had become one-sided, so he left the bar early. He walked past Helen and Emily and went straight to the guest room. Helen felt a tension she hadn't expected. Over the next 3 days, Jim stayed silent, showing no intention of apologizing. His defiance unsettled her. On Tuesday, Helen met Frank at the motel and had another flat tire, making her suspect the flats weren't a coincidence. She decided not to return to the motel again. Fortunately, she had the spare tire fixed on Monday, and Frank replaced it. Meanwhile, Jim spent Monday packing his belongings, preparing for his move. He carefully arranged his clothes to make it look like he hadn't packed much, wondering if Helen would notice he didn't take any cold weather gear. On Monday and Tuesday afternoons, Jim waited at Home Depot for his wife to leave work. On Monday, she went grocery shopping afterwards, so Jim parked at his new favorite bar for dinner and Monday night football. Is Dad coming home today? Emily asked her mother. Who knows? Helen sighed. He's not talking to me and is still sleeping in the guest room. I don't know what's gotten into him. Could he have found out what's going on? Emily asked. You told him he couldn't sleep with you and wouldn't cook for him, so why would he come home? Maybe you should forgive him and cook him a nice meal. Tomorrow night I can't. I'm meeting Frank. You'll have to eat leftovers. I'll be home later. You're prioritizing Frank over Dad, Emily pointed out. Frank's winning this game. At least Frank treats me with respect and doesn't get drunk or hang up on me, Helen retorted. Does he take out the trash, mow the lawn, paint the house, or pay our bills? Emily asked pointedly. Of course not, Helen snapped. Frank just gets into bed with you, Emily responded. Dad does all the hard work, and you think Frank's the best because he flatters you. You expect so much from Dad, but give what he deserves to Frank. That's not fair. Helen, angered, said, I'm your mother. Show some respect. And Dad expects your respect and loyalty, but he's not getting it, Emily argued. Respect has to be earned, not demanded. That evening, Emily stopped Jim as he walked through the living room. Our district championship game is tomorrow at 4. Can you make it? I'll check my schedule, Jim replied vaguely before heading upstairs. I think he's mad at me too, Emily said. I haven't done anything, but he doesn't seem to care. He's in a weird mood. Helen tried to comfort her. He's upset about something but doesn't know how to express it. He'll come to your game tomorrow. Look, his truck is in the garage. The next evening, when Jim didn't show up at her match, Emily was in tears. He didn't want to come. Why is he mad at me? That's a good question, Helen said sadly. Let's find out what's going on. Helen returned home around 6:30, and by 7 o'clock, another empty six-pack was on the counter, with no sign of Jim. It's only 8 o'clock, Helen said, worried. He can't already be in bed. Once again, they found Jim in a deep sleep in the guest room, unable to wake him. Frustrated, they retreated to the living room. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving. Will you let Dad eat with us? Emily asked. Of course, Helen replied. His parents and mine will be here. This is his home, and I won't keep him away. Hopefully he'll be in a better mood by then. I invited everyone for 4. Who did you invite, Mom? Please tell me it's not Frank. Frank and his wife are coming. I think he and Jim will get along. They both like football and hunting, Helen reasoned. But one of the things they share is you, Emily pointed out. This is a terrible idea. I just think they'll get along. Jim needs more friends, Helen insisted. You're out of your mind. This won't end well, Emily argued. We'll see, Helen replied confidently. Jim woke early on Thanksgiving and went to a small cafe for breakfast. He returned home around 9 a.m., greeted by the smells of turkey and pie. Dinner's at noon, Helen announced. Our folks will be here soon. Want something to drink? Jim shook his head, sat in the living room, and turned on the TV, uninterested in Helen's attempts at peace. He greeted her parents politely when they arrived, as well as his own parents a few minutes later. During dinner, Jim made an announcement. I'm being transferred to another plant. I leave tomorrow, and it could last until spring or longer. Helen was shocked. Why hadn't he mentioned this before? She knew she wouldn't want to move to Michigan, and this might explain his recent behavior. This is surprising, Helen's mother commented. Helen didn't mention it. Will she join you? I'll go alone, Jim replied. It wouldn't be fair to make Emily change schools or for Helen to leave her job. I'll manage on my own for a few months. The grandparents started discussing Michigan's weather, while Helen and Emily exchanged concerned glances, thinking Jim was upset about leaving his family. After dinner, Jim, his father, and Helen's father watched the Eagles game. Disappointed by their team's poor performance, they were half watching the pregame show for the next game when the doorbell rang. Jim didn't pay attention until Helen introduced a couple in the hallway. "This is Nancy and her husband Frank," she said, naming everyone in the room, with Jim last. Frank, grinning, walked up to Jim wearing a Dallas Cowboys sweater. "Hello, Jimmy. I've heard a lot about you," Frank said, extending his hand. Jim, who had held everything in, snapped. Without warning, he kicked Frank hard between the legs, then kneed him in the face, knocking him to the floor with a broken nose. Everyone froze in shock. Nancy screamed and rushed to Frank, while Helen vomited in the bathroom and Emily grabbed ice and a washcloth to help. Stunned by his own actions, Jim grabbed his coat and left the house. He drove south on Highway 81, stopping only when he reached Hillsville, Virginia, where he rented a room and quickly fell asleep. The next morning, Jim turned on his phone to find it full of messages, which didn't surprise him. After listening to a few, he deleted them all. Ignoring the calls from his mother, Helen, and Emily demanding to know where he was, Jim decided to stick to his plan and continued driving south on Highway 77. As Jim drove, he kept replaying the previous day's events. Frank had it coming, but what would the consequences be? Would he get arrested, lose his job before reaching Daytona, or face divorce? Realizing he needed to check his messages to understand the situation, he decided to leave his phone on but not answer calls, checking messages after the caller hung up. Helen called within 30 minutes. After waiting a bit, Jim read her text. "Jim, call me. I know the transfer has shaken you, but you need to pull yourself together. Frank's nose needs surgery, but he won't press charges. Please call me." Jim drove all day and arrived at his new apartment at 5 p.m. He retrieved the key from a safe outside, unpacked, parked the truck in the garage, and went to bed by 7 o'clock. With 2 days off before starting his new job, Jim noticed some issues with the apartment and planned to fix them on Saturday. Concerned Helen might find out about the Daytona plant and try to join him, he decided to call her on Saturday morning. "Hello?" "Hi, Helen. It's Jim. Where the hell are you? We called all night, but your phone was off. What's wrong with you? Frank ended up with a broken nose and a concussion just for rooting for a different football team. Are you crazy?" Jim ended the call, turned off his phone, and made a list of items to buy. An hour later, he returned with a new door lock, air filter, cleaning supplies, and a 30-pack of beer. At noon, he called Emily. "Hi, Dad. Glad you called after your fight with Frank. An ambulance took him to the hospital, and everyone was worried you were losing it. Mom was scared they'd sue us. I had to clean up the blood while Mom took Nancy to the hospital. Anything else happen?" "No, pretty quiet," Jim replied. "Just one more thing. Mom's upset you hung up on her again." "Yeah, I could tell," Jim admitted. "I called to let you know I got a new job and start Monday, in case the police ask where I am." "Don't worry," Emily reassured him. "Frank didn't press charges, though I think his wife wanted him to. The cops won't come looking for you. But why the secrecy about your transfer? Is that why you've been acting weird?" "The transfer made me rethink my life. I realized I need to respect myself to be respected. I've lost my way over the years, but I'm getting back on track." "Are you okay, Dad? Any health issues?" Emily asked, concerned. "Not exactly. You and your mom know what's going on," Jim said sadly. "Just tell her I'm fine and not to worry." "Okay, Dad. I'll call you sometimes. Will you answer?" Jim struggled with his anger toward his daughter. He loved her, but her disregard hurt. He didn't want her out of his life, even though he was still upset about the betrayal. "If you don't call while I'm working, I'll answer," he replied after a pause. "What about Mom? Can she call?" Emily insisted. "Will you answer?" "If she wants to call just to tell me off, she shouldn't bother," Jim responded quickly. "But if there's an issue with the house or family, she should call. That's fair, right?" "I'll tell her. Good luck with your new job and stay warm. Is it cold there now?" "It's better than I expected. Don't worry about the weather. I'll be fine. Goodbye." As soon as Emily put down the phone, Helen started asking questions. "What did he say? Did he apologize? Is he afraid to come home? What did he say about me?" "He doesn't seem scared at all," Emily replied. "He said no one would respect him unless he respected himself. That's why he cut Frank off and keeps hanging up on you. If you want to talk to him, you'll need to show more respect. He's the one who attacked a guest in our home over a t-shirt and keeps hanging up. Next time we talk, I'm telling him exactly what I think," Helen vowed. "That's exactly why he's hanging up." He won't listen to you if you're disrespectful. Frank is the only one benefiting from this unless you find more boyfriends, Emily retorted. Why do you keep making these rude comments? Helen asked. Because you've been rude and disrespectful. Frank laughed at Dad, not just because the Cowboys beat the Eagles, but because he slept with Dad's wife. That's enough to drive anyone crazy, but Dad doesn't know. Frank was hinting. Helen disagreed. He knew Frank was being an idiot, so he put him in his place. You don't disrespect someone in their own home. Any man would be angry, even if he didn't know his wife was cheating, Helen argued. I'm done with this talk. You live under my roof, and you will show me respect. On Wednesday evening, Jim was by the pool when his phone rang. He saw it was Helen and let it go to voicemail. Later, he checked the message. Jim, I know you're screening my calls. Please call me back. We need to make decisions about the house. Who'll shovel the driveway? Should we sign a fuel oil delivery contract? Which company to use? Please call. Hearing no hostility, Jim decided to call Helen back. She had important questions, and he didn't want her or Emily to face any issues. Thanks for calling, Jim, Helen said calmly. I'm worried about the things you usually handle around the house. Now that it's snowing, what should I do? I'll make a list and email it to you, Jim promised. I should have thought of that. Helen then asked, Are you coming home for Christmas? Mom and Dad invited us for dinner, and your parents want to see us on Christmas Eve. It's awkward telling them you're not responding to their calls. I don't know my schedule yet. If possible, I'll come home. You can tell them that. But they need to be polite if they want me to answer their calls. Every message I get, even from my mom, is hostile, and I don't need that, Jim insisted. I'll tell them, but I'm not sure it'll help. They weren't happy about how you treated Frank or that you left afterward, Helen replied cautiously. So there's no point in me coming for Christmas, is there? I'm not showing up just to be treated like the bad guy. If they want me there because they like my company, that's different, Jim said. You can still come home, Helen said, surprising Jim with tears in her voice. Emily and I would love to see you. We'll try not to make any dumb comments. Do you miss making love to me? Jim didn't want to be physical engaged with Helen anymore after hearing her with Frank. But he replied carefully, I've always enjoyed making love. Every time was special to me. He didn't mention that it was because he didn't realize he was getting Frank's leftovers. I agree, Helen cried. You're the best lover in the world, and I miss you. Please come home for Christmas. Let's see if you can join us for the week. I'll check. They don't usually give time off on short notice, especially that week, but I'll let you know, Jim promised. I'll also email you the list of things to handle for winter. Helen smiled after hanging up. Is he really the world's best lover? Emily asked. Frank might not like hearing that. He thinks he's number one. I've told you to be careful when talking about Frank. Your father is actually better than Frank, so that wasn't a lie. Frank is more fun, but not better. When Frank hears that, he'll be pleased. His wife thinks he's better than her other boyfriends. What husband wouldn't be proud of that? Emily noticed her mother leaving the room in tears. Jim enjoyed his new life, swimming daily, getting more tanned, and feeling comfortable. He was confident in his ability to manage the plant's equipment. What surprised him was the number of single women, widows, and divorcees in his condo, all of whom seemed to enjoy his company. Once they learned he could fix things, he was constantly in demand. This didn't bother him, as the women often thanked him with baked goods, meals, or leaving wine or beer at his door. A few days before Christmas, Helen urged Jim to come home for the holidays. After fixing a closet door for Mrs. Struthers, he turned around to find her unclothed. Jim, I don't have much money, but I have needs. Will you make love to me? She asked. Jim hesitated. He had never cheated on his wife and had only ever been with her. Susan was attractive, but he needed to figure out his marriage first. I need to sort out my marriage. After Christmas, I'll know more. I've never cheated, but that might change soon. I'll let you know. I understand, Susan said, covering herself. If you end things with your wife, you'll have plenty of women here ready to console you. Jim called Helen to say he'd try to be home for Christmas Eve. He was surprised by how happy she sounded. Knowing he missed both Helen and Emily, he decided to head north. He planned to drive halfway on the first day, shop on the second, and arrive home before Christmas Eve. When Jim reached his street at 9 a.m., he saw several cars parked in his driveway, recognizing a few. Helen was hosting her usual holiday gathering for her Home Depot friends. As he approached the door, he saw Frank in the kitchen. Anger flared, but Jim didn't want to ruin the holiday mood. He decided to enter through the basement and wait until Frank left. After dozing on an old sofa, Jim woke up 2 hours later. Hearing nothing from upstairs, he peeked outside and saw only one car left. Curious, he went to the front door and saw Helen and Frank in the kitchen. Frank kissed her and touched her bosom, reigniting Jim's anger. He resisted the urge to attack, knowing he couldn't get away with it again. Instead, he planned to sneak upstairs, take pictures, and then leave for Florida. Jim entered the house, climbed the stairs quietly, and hid in the guest room. He turned off the lights and waited. Helen eventually went to the master bedroom, and Jim heard the shower turn on. He guessed she was preparing for Frank. Jim turned off the hallway light and waited in the darkness, knowing Frank would be visible in the dim light from the street. When Frank was almost at the top of the stairs, Jim kicked him in the jaw, sending him tumbling down like a bobsledder. Frank landed at the bottom, motionless. The water was still running, and Helen hadn't heard anything. As Jim's anger faded, he realized that if Frank was dead, he was in serious trouble. Jim hurried down the stairs, stepped over Frank's body, and left the house. 2 hours later, he was already 100 miles away and decided to keep driving before stopping at a cheap motel just before dawn, paying in cash. After a 4-hour rest, he continued south, reflecting on his situation. He had attacked Frank, and depending on whether Frank survived, this could become serious. Jim realized he needed to stay away from both Frank and Helen to avoid ending up in prison. They weren't worth it. Despite everything, Jim admitted to himself that being without Helen made him feel lonely. She and Emily had been his world, but they betrayed him, and he knew he needed to move on. Around noon, his phone rang, but seeing it was his parents' number, he let it go to voicemail. He wasn't ready to explain why he missed Christmas Eve dinner or why he attacked Frank again. Half an hour later, Jim gathered the courage to listen to the message. "Jim, it's your father. Call us when you get this. Something serious happened at your house, but Helen and Emily are fine." Jim called back immediately. "What happened?" he asked when his father answered. "Son, it's Frank. He was at your house again last night. He fell down the stairs and was seriously injured. Broken jaw, arm, ribs, and another concussion. His wife found out he was with Helen and got there before the ambulance did. She was furious, tried to attack Helen, and even tried to throw Frank off the gurney. It was a mess." Jim's father continued. "After Thanksgiving, we thought you overreacted, but now we see why you did what you did. Your mother and I are proud of you. You showed more restraint than I would have." "Thanks, Dad," Jim replied, relieved. "How's Emily? Was she home during all this?" "That's another issue," his father said. "Emily had a serious talk with us this morning. She spent the night at a friend's, but she admitted she knew Helen was cheating. She wanted to keep the family together until she finished school, then planned to tell you. We're disappointed, but we all hugged it out." "Thanks for helping Emily through this," Jim said. "Son, where are you really? I know you said you were transferred, but it seems drastic to move to Michigan in December." "The company transferred me to Daytona Beach. I got a promotion, a big raise, and a small apartment. I'm the maintenance supervisor now," Jim explained. "That's great. Would you mind if your mom and I visit in February? We'll be sick of winter by then." "Anytime, Dad. Just don't tell Helen where I am. I don't want to deal with her now." "Understood, Jim. But you should talk to Emily. She's pretty down about all this. She thinks you knew about the affair because you've been so cold to them. Did you know she knew?" "I need to go, Dad. We'll talk more later. Thanks for your support." "Love you both," Jim said, ending the call. Jim returned to his apartment at dusk on Christmas Eve, feeling depressed about spending his first Christmas alone. He turned on the TV, opened a beer, and sat on the couch to zone out. As he was deep in thought, the doorbell rang. "I saw your light and came to wish you a Merry Christmas," Susan Struthers said. "It's not good to be alone on Christmas. Your return tells me you haven't made peace with your wife." "That's a fair guess," Jim agreed. "Her boyfriend was going to sleep in my bed. I hate crowds unless it's a couple of women." "What about just one woman?" Susan asked, stepping closer. "I might make you move a bit, but I don't think you'll mind." Jim thought about Susan's offer before accepting. "I'd really like that. I should warn you, though. I haven't had sex in a long time, so I might not be very good. Otherwise, my wife wouldn't have looked elsewhere." "I doubt you're the problem," Susan replied. "A man as kind and thoughtful as you is bound to be great in bed. Do you have rubbers?" "No, I haven't used them in 20 years, Jim admitted, realizing he had a lot to learn about dating. "Your partners will appreciate it if you do. It's a smart, responsible choice," Susan assured him. Jim had a memorable Christmas Eve, and his anger toward Helen and Emily started to fade, replaced by happy memories that boosted his self-esteem. Though the pain from their betrayal lingered, he began to move on. Susan helped him see that life was still worth living. Susan left early Christmas morning to avoid gossip, but they agreed to meet at the pool later. That evening, they shared a home-cooked meal and more closeness. Jim returned to his apartment by 9 p.m., aware that others might have noticed his visits to Susan's place. A few minutes after he got home, his phone rang. "Dad, you didn't come home for Christmas. I don't blame you. Mom's a mess, and I feel awful too. I'm sorry for what we did. I knew it was wrong, but wanted you two to stay together until I finished school." "It's in the past," Jim said, "but I won't lie. You both hurt me deeply. I never knew your mom was so unhappy, and I didn't expect you to help her hide it. I'm trying to get through this, but it's tough." "The strange thing is, Mom's not unhappy with you. She says you're a good husband, father, and lover. She just wanted to try something different and regrets it now. Did you know about her and Frank on Thanksgiving?" "Yes, and I should have handled it better, but Frank pushed me too far with his disrespect." "I get it. I saw Frank's grin and knew he was gloating. Mom said it was about the Cowboys shirt, but I knew better. Did you miss my last 2 matches because you were upset with me?" "Yes, I'm sorry, but when Frank said he'd be there, I knew I couldn't go without causing a scene." "Did you hear Frank that day when I brought the spare tire? You cut the valve stem, didn't you? You wanted Mom to call you for help, but instead, I got involved." "I'm really sorry, Dad. I was selfish and stupid, and now I'm paying for it." "Don't blame yourself. I should have confronted your mother right then, but I was too angry. I might have done something I'd regret." "I doubt it, Dad. You're not the type to hurt Mom. But Frank's a different story. Grandpa told me Frank fell down our stairs last night. He's pretty banged up, but will recover. By the way, I found the laptop you left me for Thanksgiving in the basement. Thank you so much. I'll use it a lot, especially for college next year." "I'm glad you liked it," Jim said, realizing he'd forgotten about the gifts he left. "Did you find the one for your mother?" She cried when she saw the pearls. It made her feel even worse about how she treated you. "It's funny. I didn't see the gifts until a few days before Christmas when I was looking for new tree lights. Thank you for being such a good father. I'm starting to appreciate you more." "Don't be upset. When I was your age, I thought my parents were clueless, but they got a lot smarter over the years," Jim chuckled. "I just want you to be happy and live a good life. Don't worry about me." "I love you, Dad. Maybe I'll visit you this winter." "I didn't tell the whole truth about my transfer. The company moved me to Daytona Beach. I've got a small place here, and you're welcome to visit anytime. There's a pool outside, and the ocean's just a couple of blocks away." "Are you kidding? If Mom and I knew that, we would have gone with you. But I get it. We didn't deserve to be with you after all we did. I don't blame you for not telling us. We lied to you, so you had the right to keep something from us. This will really hit Mom hard. You don't have to tell her, but it's not a secret anymore. I'll email her my address so we can sort out the divorce without me having to go back." "I was afraid to ask. Are you divorcing Mom? I get it, and I don't blame you. I warned her about Frank, but she thought you'd never find out. I wish things had turned out differently. Good night, Dad. I'll try to visit." "Great. Good night, and Merry Christmas." Emily had just put her phone away when her mother entered the room. "Did I hear right that your father isn't in Michigan? Where is he, and why did he lie to us?" "He's at his company's new plant in Daytona Beach," Emily replied. "He didn't lie. He said he was being transferred. We just assumed it was Michigan. He didn't tell us because he was there when you called me to bring the spare tire to the motel. He heard everything and knew who you were with. He didn't feel obligated to consider us." "Why didn't he say anything then? Was he afraid of Frank?" Helen asked. "Afraid of Frank? Are you serious?" Emily shot back. Dad wiped the floor with Frank. "Frank's no match for him in a fight or in raising a family. You always try to find faults in Dad to justify your actions. You'd better not treat your next husband the way you treated Dad." "Next husband? What did your father tell you?" Helen asked, alarmed. "He's done with your lies and deception. He's considering divorce, just like I warned you he would. I don't want a divorce. I don't even like Frank. None of this would have happened if he hadn't fallen down the stairs," Helen whined. "Didn't you listen? You were doomed the day I brought you the spare tire at the motel. Dad was there, saw everything, and knew how much we disrespected him. He knows you lied, cheated, and by Thanksgiving, you were already a divorced woman in his eyes. Frank isn't to blame, you are. Maybe now that Frank's wife is divorcing him, you two can be together," Emily suggested. "I don't want Frank. I want Jim back," Helen sobbed. The next day was even worse for Helen. Emily called her father to explain the latest issue. "Mom got a letter from the health department. Frank has an STD, and now Mom has to get tested and inform everyone she's been with. You're on her list, and you'll get a letter soon." Wow, I should have seen this coming. I'll make an appointment today. Thanks for telling me right away. I appreciate you looking out for me. I was lost for a while, but I'm back on track. Take care, Dad. Jim immediately arranged for a checkup and was relieved that Susan had been careful enough to prevent the spread of anything Helen might have passed on. On his way home, he bought a variety of rubbers and filled a bowl with them, placing it on his bedside table. He vowed never to risk spreading a preventable disease. As time passed, Jim got his test results and was pleased to learn he was healthy. His free time was filled with requests from the women in his condo to help with various tasks. He became more popular, and one evening Susan admitted she had mentioned his skills to a couple of women. Word spread, and Jim found himself regularly refilling his rubber bowl. The women who visited appreciated his concern for their health, which only enhanced his reputation. One afternoon before Easter, Jim was surprised when Emily showed up with a small suitcase. Before he could speak, she hugged him tightly. "I'm so sorry, Dad. Please forgive me and let me stay for a few days. I'll leave if you want." Jim, surprised but happy to see her, said, "You're always welcome here. Come on, I'll show you the room. You look all grown up." "I told you I finally filled out in all the right places," Emily laughed, turning so he could see. "I'm the same bra size as Mom now, though it probably fits me better. Mom's getting pretty thin. I hitched a ride with the Shears. They're headed to Orlando and dropped me off. I knew you'd let me stay. It's spring break, and I'll only be here for 4 days before heading back to the cold. This place is great. I guess you like living here." "It's smaller than our house, but it has everything I need, including a heated pool right outside," Jim said as Emily looked around. "Looks like you're getting everything you need," Emily laughed, spotting the dish of rubbers in his bedroom. "Good for you, Dad. You deserve some happiness after everything. I won't bother you. I'll just relax by the pool while you're at work. I haven't seen the sun in ages." "Tomorrow evening, we'll go out to dinner," Jim said. "There are some great places here. Ribs, steak, seafood, you name it. I'll take you to a spot where the guys from work hang out so they can see how gorgeous my daughter is." The next evening, Jim and Emily sat at the rib joint and had a great time. "Why did you forgive me, Dad? I don't know if I would have if I were you. It was a huge mistake to help Mom with her infidelity. I hate myself for it, and I'm truly sorry." Jim replied, "I'm much happier with you around than without you. In that sense, I'm selfish. It makes me happy, and now it's become one of my life's goals." "I'm glad you feel that way. I hope you're always happy I'm here," Emily said sincerely. "We were always close, and I hated myself when I realized I pushed you away. Do you think you'll ever forgive Mom? She's not doing well without you. She's lost weight and rarely goes out. When rumors spread that Frank had an STD and that his partners needed testing, half the store employees were terrified. Frank seems to have gotten it from a new cashier, infecting a lot of people. Mom was the only manager on the list, which was awkward for her. Your mother and I agreed to be partners, Emily. Partners should be honest with each other. They need to trust each other, Jim admitted. I don't trust her anymore. I understand, especially after meeting your harem at the pool today. It was awkward having so many women ask me about you. From the way they talked, I knew at least 4 were sleeping with you. My dad owns a condo, Emily smirked. Seriously, they all think you're a sensitive, honest, attractive man who's pretty good in bed. I'm not sure about that. I have a few friends who visit now and then. I don't think they see me as anything special. It's more like I'm just available, Jim said modestly. Mom made a huge mistake, Emily said. Can I come here after I finish school and look for a summer job? I'm thinking about going to college nearby. Can I stay with you? Can I spend weekends and holidays with you? It's too far to commute to work, and Mom and I don't get along anymore. We're not close. Her betrayal hurt me more than I realized at the time. Jim eagerly agreed to Emily's request. He felt much happier spending time with his only child. He enjoyed watching her grow into a woman. They spoke several times a week after she returned from spring break. She insisted he not attend her graduation, but he promised to go to Florida the next day. On Sunday afternoon, Jim opened the door to greet Emily. When he saw Helen, he was stunned, unable to think or move for what felt like minutes, though it was only 10 or 15 seconds. He regained some composure. Come on in, Helen. Can I get you a drink? Jim asked automatically, trying to figure out why she was at his door. Thanks, Jim. That would be great, Helen said. Jim followed them into the kitchen, poured them some iced tea, and sat down as Helen took her seat on the other side of the table. I came to pick up Emily. She told me she's living here with you. I've changed jobs and moved to Dayton. We need to figure out what to do with the house, Helen explained. You never filed for divorce and we haven't spoken, so I'm not sure what you want to do. What made you decide to move here? Jim asked, surprised. So what do you think will happen? Helen joked. I think I'll stop freezing every winter. With Emily in college in Florida, I have nothing to do there but gossip. I'm not sure what Emily told you, but your parents don't talk to me and mine aren't any better. I've let down a lot of people, including myself, but mostly you, Helen admitted. I can't ask for forgiveness because my actions were unforgivable. I'm looking for a fresh start where people won't mock me for having a pop. By the way, I'm glad I didn't pass it on to you. I think you'd stopped having sex with me by the time Frank gave me that gift. I'm responsible for what happened to us. I tried to blame you. Then there was Frank, the girl who infected him, even the man who wrote the letter. Frank went down. I realized it was all on me. I ruined my life and tried to ruin yours. If you hadn't found out, you would have appreciated Frank's little gift for me. I've come to regret what I did. I'm not sure how I thought it was normal at the time, like I was entitled to a fling. I even dragged Emily into this, and I'll never forgive myself for that. I nearly destroyed her relationship with her father because I was a selfish brat. I kept telling myself Frank was an idiot and this would end badly, Helen admitted, but I didn't listen. I'm so glad you welcomed her back into your life. Your love and approval mean the world to her. It meant a lot to me before I lost my way. Now that I don't have it, I'd do anything to get it back. I think we should make a list of things to sell and split the money. I assumed you had already filed for divorce. Isn't Frank single now? Jim asked pointedly. That's what I've heard. But if you mean do I care about that idiot, then no, I don't. I'm a fool, but not so much that I'd get Frank to divorce me, Helen replied. I thought you had already divorced me. I've given you plenty of reasons, Jim said. I'm pretty content with what I'm doing here. You know how much I hate change, and divorce can be pretty disruptive. We should discuss this now, shouldn't we? I guess so. If it's up to me, I'd like to stay married, but my past actions don't really support that, do they? I know you're too good a man to stay with a lying, cheating wife. I knew it all along, but I kept telling myself he'll never know. Where are you staying tonight? Helen asked. We've got time. We can talk about selling the house and everything else in the next week or two. I'm going to find a motel when I leave here. I noticed one near Highway 95. It's pretty close to Home Depot, Helen said, mentioning that she would start working there in a week. Emily went grocery shopping to give us some time to talk, but she'll be back soon, and I need to go. Emily's room has 2 single beds, Jim suggested. You could stay there if she doesn't mind. Won't that make you uncomfortable? I know I'm not her favorite person right now, and I deserve that. I'll be fine. If Emily doesn't mind, we'll ask her when she gets back, Jim replied. Emily didn't mind sharing a room with her mother for a while. Over the next few days, the 3 of them started falling back into the routines they had shared for years. Jim stayed away from the pool and the other women while Helen was living with him. He didn't want to hurt her. A few women came to the pool and asked, "When are you leaving?" Helen began one evening after Emily had gone to a concert. They always talk about your big bowl of rubbers and which ones they like best. It's actually pretty funny when you think about it. They stopped just short of telling me I ruined their Zek's lives. Have you really pleased 4 women, Jim? I'm impressed. Too bad I didn't make an impression on you before I met Frank, Helen added. Jim lost his temper. I'm not going to apologize for making these women happy. None of them are married, and they know I'm not looking for commitments. I try to give them as much pleasure as I can, and they enjoy it. How about some fun with me? Helen asked. No strings attached. I feel like I owe you for taking such good care of me after what I did to you. Jim insisted he wasn't the same guy she remembered. I'm more demanding and assertive now. I tell these women what I want, and they seem to like it. I never let them stay more than one night. So stay with me for one night. I can handle whatever you want to do. It will make me feel better about what I did, and I'll do my best to make you feel even better, Helen promised. Jim thought about her words for a few minutes before making a decision. 10 minutes later, they were unclothed on his bed. My God, Helen gasped, trying to catch her breath. That was amazing. You've learned some new tricks. Thanks, Jim. Helen was moving her clothes from Jim's room to Emily's when she heard Emily's voice. You two are loud enough. I'm glad you're done so I can get some sleep. Helen stayed with Emily and Jim during the summer. She slept on Emily's second bed and visited Jim often. She frequently told Jim he was the only man she'd ever be with. Jim just nodded in agreement. After the first night, Jim noticed Helen often counting the rubbers in the bowl. He realized she was trying to give him everything she had, keeping him from being with the other women in the building. Helen didn't like that her shift ended at 10 p.m. and Jim came home at 5. At least twice a week, she would come home to find fresh sheets on his bed and a couple of rubbers missing. since she had to leave for work at 2 p.m. She spent most of her mornings by the pool. The other women weren't mean to her. It was clear they all knew her marriage was on the brink and that she had caused the damage by cheating. Helen knew that when one of the women made a comment or asked a question, it was a hint. "Helen, did you pick out the new blue bedding for Jim's room?" Susan Struthers asked one morning. "It goes nicely with the curtains and carpet, doesn't it?" "Yes, Monica Barron, it's a lovely masculine color, and Jim is a very masculine man," Helen replied. "Jim, you don't want these women in your bed," Helen complained that night. "I'll give you as much Zex as you want. Aren't I enough for you?" "Exactly," Jim replied. "I won't see any of these women again." "Then why are there 2 rubbers missing from the bowl today? How does everyone know the color of your bedding?" Helen asked. "I honestly have no idea," Jim said with a smile.
In life, there are moments when everything seems perfect. The relationship, the home, the shared dreams. But sometimes, beneath the surface of our happiness, betrayal brews, unseen until the day it all unravels. This is the story of Ethan, a man who discovered his wife's secret romance with their neighbor and how he reacted in ways that no one saw coming. Let's meet the characters. Ethan Collins. A 33-year-old graphic designer dedicated to his career and his marriage. On the outside, Ethan is calm, collected, and trustworthy. He's the type of man who believes in loyalty, honesty, and integrity. His life revolves around his wife, Hannah, whom he adores and trusts implicitly. Hannah Collins. A 29-year-old novelist, known for her beauty, creativity, and passionate nature. She's a writer by trade, spending most of her time in her office, working on a novel that has consumed her for the last 3 years. Her marriage to Ethan is one of love, but she has a secret she's kept hidden. Ryan Carter. The next-door neighbor, a 31-year-old fitness enthusiast with a magnetic personality. He and Hannah have known each other for years, but recently, their relationship had become far more complicated. Ryan is charming, easygoing, and always knows how to make people feel special, especially Hannah. Ethan's life had always been predictable, steady. He woke up each day beside Hannah, had breakfast with her, and kissed her goodbye before heading off to work. The routine felt comfortable, the kind of stability that many people yearned for. They were a young couple, living in a quiet suburban neighborhood, their home nestled between neat, symmetrical lawns and flower beds. But in the quiet of their home, a storm was brewing, one that Ethan couldn't have possibly anticipated. For the past 3 years, Hannah had been working tirelessly on her novel. She would lock herself away for hours in her home office, typing away at her laptop, emerging only for brief meals or to run errands. Ethan knew how important this project was to her, and he respected it. After all, they had discussed it many times. She dreamed of publishing a best-selling novel. But what Ethan didn't know was that her project wasn't just a book. It was a cover for something far darker. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when Ethan came home early from work. He'd been feeling restless all day, something gnawing at the back of his mind. He wasn't sure what it was, but there was an unease that he couldn't shake. Perhaps it was the way Hannah had been acting lately. Distant, distracted, avoiding eye contact. Her usual warmth had been replaced with something colder. He opened the door to their house, calling out her name. "Hannah? I'm home early." The house was eerily quiet. Ethan walked into their living room and immediately noticed something strange. Hannah's laptop was sitting on the coffee table, open and on. Normally, it would have been locked away in her office, but here it was, unattended. His heart skipped a beat, and a strange impulse overtook him. Maybe it's nothing, he thought. Maybe she's just working on her novel. But something told him to look. He couldn't explain it. He clicked the mouse, and the screen came alive. What he saw on the screen was an email thread between Hannah and Ryan. The subject was innocuous at first. Finished the chapter. But as he scrolled down, it quickly became clear that this wasn't about a book. The emails were flirtatious, filled with intimate words and passionate exchanges. There were mentions of secret meetings, late-night rendezvous, and declarations of love. Ethan's hands began to tremble as he read further. The words stung. His wife, the woman he trusted above all else, was having an affair with their neighbor. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He had been living in a lie for years, and this was the painful truth. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was a violation of everything they had built together. Ethan's mind was racing. He was furious, but there was a cold, calculated part of him that knew how to handle this situation. He wasn't going to let his emotions get the best of him. Not yet. When Hannah returned home later that evening, she could feel the tension in the air. Ethan was sitting on the couch, his eyes fixed on the floor, his face unreadable. She tried to play it cool, putting her keys down and walking over to kiss him. "Hey, babe, how was your day?" she asked, but there was a nervousness in her voice. "Ethan?" she asked again when he didn't respond. His response was calm, measured, but his voice was thick with an underlying anger. "We need to talk." Hannah immediately felt a pit form in her stomach. She sat down across from him, her heart pounding. "What's wrong?" "I found the emails, Hannah," Ethan said quietly. "I know about you and Ryan." Her face went pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. Ethan's gaze never wavered from her. Finally, she spoke, her voice cracking. "Ethan, I'm so sorry. I never meant for you to find out this way." "How long?" Ethan's voice was sharp. "How long has this been going on?" Hannah's eyes welled with tears. "It started a few years ago. It was a mistake, and it got out of hand. I never wanted to hurt you." Ethan could feel his anger rising, but he held it back. "I don't want to fight. I just want to understand. How long, Hannah? How many times did you see him behind my back?" Tears streamed down her face. "Too many times to count. I was weak, Ethan. I don't know why I did it." Ethan felt a chill spread through his chest. This wasn't the woman he had married. This wasn't the woman he had trusted. She was a stranger now, and her words, though filled with guilt, could never erase the damage she had caused. "I want you to leave," Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. Hannah looked at him, her eyes wide. "Ethan, please, I love you. I made a mistake. Please don't end this like this." But Ethan was resolute. "It's over, Hannah. I need space. I need time to think." The next few days were torturous for Ethan. He pretended to go along with Hannah's attempts to apologize, but in his heart, he knew it was over. He couldn't look at her without seeing the betrayal. He couldn't hear her voice without hearing the lies. She had crossed a line, and no amount of apologies could fix it. But Ethan wasn't interested in tearing her down right away. He was patient, biding his time. He knew what he needed to do. One evening, when Hannah was out running errands, Ethan decided to take action. He knew she had been working on her novel for the last 3 years, obsessively writing and editing. It was her refuge, her escape. The novel had been her secret world, and he was going to take that from her. Ethan quietly made his way to her office. He found her laptop sitting on the desk, just as it always was. He knew exactly what he needed to do. With a few quick keystrokes, he began to erase everything, every file, every draft, every note. It wasn't just her novel he was wiping away, it was her dream, it was her escape. When he was finished, the hard drive was empty. Hannah's 3 years of work, gone. Just like the trust she had broken. When Hannah returned home that evening, she immediately noticed that her laptop was off. She felt a surge of unease. Her novel was her world, and without it, she was lost. She opened the laptop only to find that it was blank. Her heart sank. She tried clicking through the files, searching for the folder containing her novel, but it was all gone. Panic set in. "Ethan, what happened?" she cried, rushing to find him. Ethan was sitting in the living room, staring at her with cold eyes. "You've lost everything, Hannah, just like you lost me." Hannah was in disbelief. No, this can't be happening. My book, my novel." Ethan stood up, his voice cold. "You think deleting emails and hiding behind a book would make up for the things you've done? I'm not some fool you can play with. You'll never write about us again. This is the price of your betrayal." Hannah fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. She had lost everything, her affair, her trust, and now her passion. She realized in that moment that her marriage was truly over. The next day, Ethan sat down with Hannah. The conversation was inevitable. "I want a divorce," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. Hannah looked at him with pleading eyes. "Please, Ethan, we can fix this. We can work through it." But Ethan shook his head. "You had your chance, Hannah. You chose him, and now you've lost everything." Hannah was silent. She couldn't argue with him. The betrayal was too deep, the damage too great. With that, their marriage ended. And so, Ethan walked away from his wife. Revenge, though sweet, wasn't satisfying in the way he had expected. It was bittersweet. But in his mind, it was necessary. Sometimes, people need to feel the consequences of their actions before they truly understand the pain they've caused. Thank you for watching today's story. What would you have done in Ethan's position? Do you think he was justified in his actions, or did he go too far? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories. Until next time, stay tuned and keep reflecting on the consequences of every choice we make.
Your presence is no longer desired here. Please leave, you lazy individual. Who works from home? My sister said angrily, and even my parents agreed. Leave. I'm tired of a family that doesn't appreciate me and my dog. If they're going to act like that, then I'll do what I want. That's when I decided to get back at them. My name is Orla, and I'm 33 years old and single. I design websites as a freelancer, which means I can work from home using just my laptop. I have a spot in my house where I work, and I set my own schedule. Even though I had a good job, my parents started to interfere with my work about 2 years ago. One day, while I was working at home, my parents came over to visit. As soon as they walked in, they glanced around the room and began talking. "Mom, this house is really spacious. It feels like we could live here too." "You're right, there's even a spare room. Plus, it seems like a waste for Orla to live in such a big house alone." "Yeah, let's do it. We're moving this weekend." My parents didn't even acknowledge me and made all the decisions without consulting me. I made it clear that I didn't want to live with them and said, "Hold on, I don't want to live with you guys." "What are you talking about?" My father's face turned red with anger, and he shouted, "You took control of this house, claiming it from your uncle, trying to make it yours. You've hit a new low." "I simply had a conversation with Uncle, and he gave it to me. Don't try to justify yourself. In any case, our old house is crumbling. Your mother and I are moving in here this weekend." In reality, this house was a gift to me from my father's brother, my uncle, who always spoiled me. The ownership is still under my uncle's name, but he gave me permission to use it however I want. According to my father, our family home has deteriorated significantly, and it requires extensive renovations if we want to keep living there. My mother doesn't work, and my father's income isn't very high, so renovating the house isn't feasible for us. That's why they targeted the house I inherited from my uncle. I wasn't happy about it, but my parents had made up their minds to sell their own house and said they had nowhere else to go. I couldn't leave them stranded, so I reluctantly agreed to live with them. But as soon as they moved in, my parents started making sarcastic remarks. "Hey, Orla, you're in your 30s already, right? Don't you think about settling down and getting married? I'm content with my job at the moment. If you keep saying things like that, you'll just push any potential suitors away. Why don't you take a cue from your sister?" Well, my sister's marriage isn't exactly perfect, is it? But for now, I'm okay with how things are. At that point, my mother, who had been listening, chimed in. "Hey, don't speak ill of your sister like that. Unlike you, she's married and has a job at a company. You know, I may not be married, but I'm doing just fine with my work too. You're always glued to your computer. Are you earning money through some sketchy methods?" "I earn my living through honest work. There's no need to be concerned." "How dare you talk back to your mother? You're nothing like your sister." That's how it went. My parents kept comparing me to my sister. Yes, she has a job at a company, but she's only a temporary worker in an office position. I don't mean to belittle temp jobs, but I certainly make more money than she does. I understand that my parents' generation may not fully understand the idea of working from home, but it was still painful to constantly feel underestimated. Then one day, while I was preparing dinner, instead of my usually idle parents, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. To my surprise, it was my sister Mayla, carrying a lot of luggage. "Ha, Mayla, what's happening? It's been a while." "Kathy, this might seem sudden, but I'll be staying in this house from now on." I was taken aback and blurted out, "Huh? What a big house! If Uncle was giving it to someone, it should have been me." "Wait, hold on, you're moving in starting today?" I had no idea about this. "Did Mom and Dad tell you?" "I got divorced, you know, divorced. So, I'll be relying on you from now on." Ignoring my surprise, Mayla went upstairs and claimed an empty room for herself. Despite my attempts to resist, my parents sided with Mayla, and I felt powerless to stop it. From that point on, my stress only grew. After her divorce, Mayla had quit her job and spent her days gossiping about me with our mother. "Hey, Mom, do you think this dress is cute?" "Oh, absolutely, Mayla, you look so pretty. It suits you perfectly. Do you agree? It's definitely not something Kathy would wear, right?" "Well, Kathy is more on the simple side. That's probably why she's having trouble finding a job. She just stays home and plays online." "Mom, you can't just say things like that." As I was cooking dinner, they purposely made sure I could hear their conversation. I was itching to respond, but I knew that would just play into their hands. So, no matter what they said, I kept living without reacting. Then one day, a friend of mine had a litter of 4 puppies, and I decided to adopt one of them. I named him Max. He's a small black chihuahua with the most adorable round eyes. Whenever he looks at me, he wags his tail so hard it seems like it might fall off. Having a chihuahua has been a dream of mine since I was young. Working from home can get lonely, so I thought Max could provide some much-needed company. From now on, your name is Max, okay? Woof. I didn't really consult with my family. When I decided to adopt Max, after all, this is my house, and I'm the one who will be taking care of all the expenses for him, so I don't see why they should have any complaints. When I brought Max home, as expected, my parents and Mayla started complaining. "Hey, we didn't know you were getting a dog." "That's right, dogs can be smelly, you know." "I can't stand bad smells, Kathy. How could you just bring a dog home without talking to us first?" "We didn't agree to this," they kept complaining. I firmly told them, firstly, I didn't just pick him up off the street. A friend gave him to me. Plus, I'm the one who's going to take care of all the expenses for Max, so there shouldn't be any problem. What I choose to have in my house is my business. If you have any complaints, you're welcome to leave. At first, they complained loudly, their faces red with anger, but within a few hours, they were completely won over by Max's cuteness and began showering him with affection. "Aren't you just adorable? Are you mommy's boy or daddy's? Or maybe sis, look this way, sweetheart." Wait a minute, what happened to their anger from just a moment ago? Was it all just a dream? My entire family became completely enamored with Max. From then on, they were always doting on him. Because of this, their animosity toward me decreased, and I could enjoy relatively peaceful days. Then, one day, an incident shattered this calmness. While I was out running an errand, I got a call from my sister Mayla. "Hello, come back home immediately," she burst out. In response to my sister's sudden outburst, I asked what was wrong. She vented her frustration, yelling at me, "It's not what happened. Max made a mess on my clothes. What if they smell? I'll just wash them quickly, and they'll be fine. Besides, isn't it your fault for leaving your clothes on the floor?" "What? It's my fault? It's your lack of training, Max, that's to blame." "Enough. Max is still a puppy, you know. If you take him out for a walk, he won't make a mess at home. You said you were excited to walk Max today. Did you actually take him?" "Well, I was planning to take him later, and it's all because you didn't train him properly." "Then you should compensate me for the clothes," Mayla demanded. As expected, when I arrived home, my sister was furious. Both my parents had been alerted, and they stood beside Mayla glaring at me. Mayla tossed the dirty clothes at me and started yelling again, "I'm going to make you pay for the cleaning, got it?" "Why should I? It's your fault for not taking him for a walk and leaving your clothes on the floor." "Shut up. Stop arguing back. This only happened because you brought this stupid dog home. What are you going to do about it?" "Calling him a stupid dog, you were fond of him before, isn't it harsh to label him that just because he had a small accident? It's your fault for not training him properly. Take responsibility. Why can't my family think beyond their own convenience?" While I was appalled by my selfish sister, my parents interjected, "Hey, Kathy, shouldn't you at least apologize to Mayla first?" "That's correct. All of this chaos is because of that Max you brought home. Can both of you just stop already? Puppies are like babies. Can't you forgive them for making mistakes once in a while? Pathetic. This mess is all because of this dumb dog, Kathy. You made the right choice by not getting married if you were a mother. I doubt you'd raise a decent child." "What? How could you say that? If you took him for walks properly and kept the house tidy, none of this would have happened." Finally, my sister raised her eyebrow and pointed at me, saying, "I've had enough. I don't want you or this stupid dog here. Get out of this house." "What? Didn't you hear what I said? I said leave. We don't want a freeloader who works from home here." "A freeloader who works from home? How can someone who's currently unemployed say such a thing? And who do they think is covering the household expenses?" "It's me." As I stood stunned by my sister's absurd remark, even my parents joined in. "That's right, Orla. Leave this house. Your presence only brings us bad luck. You're a jinx," they insisted. All three of them kept insisting that I leave. In that moment, my anger boiled over. That's enough. I've had it. If this is how it's going to be, just wait and see. Fueled by a desire for revenge, I packed my belongings and left the house with Max. My sister's words only added to the tension. "This is all because of you. If you had just done what I said, none of this would have happened." They still didn't grasp the severity of their situation, even though consequences awaited them. But I didn't care. Let them deal with it on their own. Hiding my smirk, I left the house with Max. As expected, a few days later, my sister called in a panic. "Kathy, please help. Something's wrong with the house. What's going on with the house all of a sudden? We were given until the end of this month to leave. So what's the issue? What do you mean, what's the issue? Why are we being told to leave? Well, I've made the decision to sell the house, I said. At my words, Mela seemed to freeze, her voice trembling. She barely managed to speak. What? What does that mean? You decided to sell it? You don't have the authority. Well, actually I do. You see, that house became mine a month ago. What? Yes, I officially inherited the house from my uncle, and yes, the title is in my name. It's no wonder Mela was shocked. I hadn't mentioned this to anyone. You're joking, right? Even if Uncle transferred the title to you, you can't just sell it like that. I was concerned too, but right after you told me to leave, I spoke with Uncle. He confirmed that the house is now yours, Orla. He said, do whatever you want. You should get away from that awful family as soon as you can. What? That can't be. Whether they had been listening to my conversation with Mela on speakerphone or not, my parents began to protest. Orla, stop this nonsense. We have nowhere else to go if we leave this house. That's correct. It's unthinkable to treat your own family like this. If you're a good daughter, show some respect to your parents. Respect? I questioned them quietly. What are you talking about? You've always favored Mela over me. Who do you think has been supporting your lives for the past few years? You all had nowhere to go, so I reluctantly let you move in with me. With an unusually firm tone, my parents were left speechless. Without waiting for a response, I continued, who treated me and Max like burdens and kicked us out? It was all of you, wasn't it? Trying to find happiness by forcing out the original resident is shameless. You people belong in hell. At my outburst, my father pleaded, please help us, we're sorry. I don't care. Figure it out on your own, you fools, I replied, hanging up the phone with a loud click. Then, I blocked every family member's contacts. Seeing me raise my voice, Max looked up at me with a worried bark. I'm sorry, Max, for shouting. It's okay now. I'll protect you. I'm really glad I could rescue you from that family that treated you so poorly. Later on, it seems my parents and sister were forced to leave the house at the last minute despite their desperate attempts to cling to it. With my father's meager income and my unemployed mother and sister, it's unlikely they can lead a decent life. Rumor has it that my sister is constantly being pressured by my parents to find a job. Their family dynamics seem to be deteriorating by the day. Although I have no interest in how they're doing, it's clear that their living situation has worsened since I left. It's a classic case of getting what they deserve. They brought it upon themselves. Meanwhile, I'm enjoying my days filled with joy with my beloved dog in a new pet-friendly apartment. I can work whenever I please, and there's no one to complain about it anymore. I can use my earnings solely for myself and my dog. I'm incredibly content with my life now. Max, let's head to the dog park today. Woof. Max seems more lively. Maybe it's because that noisy family is gone. From now on, I want to protect Max for the rest of our lives and lead a peaceful existence.